So we see the Antichrist affiliated with a empire that's formed around trade. Ancient Babylon became Babylon in part because it was the economic hub of the world.
What I have found in my research, is that there is a mysterious character by the name of Robert Christian, who was the pseudonym for the builder, the financier of the Georgia Guidestones, that fits the description of a Satan-like character right out of Matthew 4, Luke chapter 4, where Satan basically takes Jesus to the temple and offers him the kingdoms of the world. And he shows them the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time because he controls all the kingdoms of the world. And that's disclosure. I mean, you have all these UFO sightings going on now. Luke chapter 21, Jesus said, man's heart will fail them for what is coming upon the earth. So there may be something, quote, extraterrestrial that makes an appearance, when God allows it, that will cause the world to freak out and that will overwhelm whatever economic, geopolitical infrastructure is in place at the time.
Welcome to the Hunt for the Antichrist. I'm your host, Erika Grey, and today I'm thrilled to introduce an interesting guest, Rob Roselli, who is an author, historian, and civil engineer. Rob has authored 3 books: The Un-American Genocidal Complex, Pleased to Meet You, and The Theory of Livevolution, Great Society of the Undead. And on this show, we will be discussing a historical clue that Rob has discovered, which will help us on our hunt for the Antichrist. I'm pleased to welcome Rob Roselli to the show. And Rob has some impressive credentials. He not only writes on the end times, but he's a civil engineer. So if you want to tell us what is your view of the Antichrist and what have you discovered to help on this hunt for the Antichrist?
The term Antichrist does not appear in the book of Revelation, which is very interesting. It does appear in 1 John chapter 2 and 1 John chapter 4, where John the Revelator, who happens to be one of the disciples, the disciple that Jesus loved, wrote the Gospel of John, the last of the 4 Gospels. Also wrote
Yes, it's interesting that it's only mentioned once, but yet many have adopted it. So go ahead.
Well, it's mentioned a few times. There's a spirit of Antichrist. And then John in 1 John 4 says, we know we are in the last times because Antichrist is prevalent. The spirit of Antichrist is in the world.
Right, the spirit of Antichrist versus Antichrist, the entity person.
So that being said, so we are in the last times. And of course, John wrote the book of Revelation 70 AD, thereabouts, when he was a prisoner on the island of Patmos. What I have found in my research, is that there is a mysterious character by the name of Robert Christian, who was the pseudonym for the builder, the financier of the Georgia Guidestones, that fits the description of a Satan-like character right out of Matthew 4, Luke chapter 4, where Satan basically takes Jesus to the temple and offers him the kingdoms of the world. And he shows them the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time because he controls all the kingdoms of the world. Now, that's 2,000 years ago. So basically, for the last 2,000 years, Satan has been in control of the world. People say, well, why would God do that? And that's another conversation. But that's just the facts of the matter at hand, is that Satan was already in control of the world as of Luke chapter 4.
Robert Christian, where did he originate?
What I've discovered on Robert Christian is that he jumps through history, and nobody can really pin this guy down, historically. I've developed a book called The Mysterious Robert Christian. And as an engineer, I like things in order, logically, categorically, mathematically. And basically what tipped me off to this Robert Christian character, besides the Georgia Guidestones, was when I'm doing my research and my writing of my first book, There was a woman by the name of Elizabeth Clare Prophet out in crazy, loony Los Angeles or loony, crazy California, at a place called Summit University that was channeling an ascended spirit by the name of Saint Germain, okay, which happens to be synonymous with Robert Christian. Okay, and he was channeling to her some very interesting things quoted in my book.
What year did this Robert Christian first appear, according to your research?
According to multiple sources, he existed anywhere from the time of the Renaissance all the way through the period of the French Revolution. Okay.
And what country did he first pop up in?
According to legends and the research that I have, he goes all the way back to ancient Egypt, and where he is equated with the Egyptian god Hermes.
I think this is very interesting, Rob. I mean, frankly, it's out there. But a lot of this, the satanic realm is out there, and it looks like you're finding a pattern. And so you've definitely got my interest.
If you go to the Robert Christian ebook, it's a voluntary donation. If you buy the book or any of the parts, I made a section called the physical Robert Christian, where I just categorized all the different historians that try to pin this guy down. You go to Rudolf Steiner. He was a famous German philosopher around the time of Adolf Hitler, a famous writer, a historian. And he says Robert Christian or Saint Germain was born in 1378 and lived all the way to 1404.
What is his notoriety through the ages? Like what do they cite him as?
He was known as a wonder man in Europe, in the 1700s.
Okay, but I'm assuming that there's something with Robert Christian that's also in Satanism, and somehow he pops up in Satanism, or as you're saying, in world history during certain key events. So if you can give us a little bit of a picture of how does he pop up?
He pops up everywhere. I know that sounds like a general answer, but again, if you read through the links, what I've done, there's like 12 different links. I tie him back all the way to the Greek god Hermes, the Egyptian god Thoth, or the Roman god Mercury, which are basically all the same, which are the son of God. According to one account, he died and he rose again and was at the forefront of something called the Rosicrucian Enlightenment around the early 1600s. Francis Bacon identified himself as Saint Germain, which is synonymous with Robert Christian or R.C. Christian or the Rosy Cross. And then he pops up again in the 1700s, or late 1700s, as a instigator of the Illuminati in Europe, the French Revolution, according to multiple historical sources. Mark Booth, Jim Mars, a secular conspiracy theorist. Jim Mars mentions him even. As I mean, Helena Blavatsky, a historian, a well-known occultist who channeled ascended masters of her own. What I'm saying is it's hard to pin this guy down. And what I'm saying is it appears that, to me, when you look at this logically, this is like, I don't know, Satan himself, but it's some kind of demonic character.
So you're right. In scriptures, you have one reference to the entity person of the Antichrist. The other references are to the spirit of Antichrist. Are you saying that this character is the spirit of Antichrist that appears at times? Would you say that he is paving the way for the Antichrist as John the Baptist paved the way for Jesus? How do you identify him? Or are you saying that this will be the Antichrist, that somehow he will reappear as the Antichrist through a politician?
Well, I believe, if you go back to John's gospel, Luke's gospel, Luke 22, and you look at Judas Iscariot, and it says Satan entered into him. Okay, now that was more of a subtle type possession. If you go to Matthew 15, and Peter starts to rebuke Jesus, and Jesus says, "Get thee behind me, Satan." So Satan was attempting to enter into Peter. So I believe that this is a satanic-like entity that people have been channeling through the centuries.
What's interesting too about the Antichrist is the Revelation 13:18, which talks about the number of the beast is his name, and it's 666. Nowhere in Scripture do you have a number for a name. So what's the significance of number? anybody numbered is numbered for death, meaning that this entity, this Antichrist, is from his birth. This is unusual because from his inception is death, numbered for death. So that kind of fits with this character who may come, who is this entity who has appeared through the ages. That actually does make sense, given the bit that we know. And you're right, Satan entered into Judas Iscariot. But the mystery in Scripture of the Revelation 13:18 is that this number for a name, when you really research that, nobody else has ever had a number being numbered for death. Anyway,
Well,
so go ahead.
That's very interesting that you mentioned that. I was going to save that for later, but again, if you go to the Mysterious R.C. Christian ebook, you can see the multiple names that he's been named over the centuries. Okay, but Revelation 13:18 specifically says to count or calculate the number of the beast 600, 6. Okay, which is 666, which adds up to 18. Now 18. Now what a very piece of strong information is that in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, the 18th degree is called the Rosy Cross, or the Rosicrucian degree of Freemasonry. Okay, and let me just take a little sidetrack here. The high level Freemasons that I quote in my book, my first book, Great Society of the Undead, They Live, Great Society of the Undead. I quote and I follow many high level Freemasons: Helena Blavatsky, the mother of the New Age, Albert Pike, Manly Hall. Okay, these are heavyweights of Freemasonry, and I went through their books and I read them, and they basically worship Lucifer, or the Saint Germain character. So I don't believe it's a coincidence at all. These people openly are Satanists. Okay, these are people that run the world. They've made a deal with Satan, like in Luke chapter 4, Jesus rejected the offer, but these people have taken him up on it, made a deal with the devil, so to speak.
I don't think that. I mean, I've met high level as well. They don't realize that this is what they're worshiping. I mean, they in their minds, they're eclectic, and they study, from Egypt. They also study Christianity. And I don't think that they realize it. I don't think it's an open, we're studying Satan. Although I do believe that within Europe and United States and elsewhere, there are those, of course, because we hear about them in the news, who openly worship Satan. But I think that, and you're right, within the Freemasonry are those symbols, because they're opening up to all of the ancient gods, which is occultism.
Well, look, I mean, the people I've mentioned, Albert Pike, for instance, openly worships Lucifer. Okay, another book that I have, Israel regarding, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the Golden Dawn Society, Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, tied to the Greek god Hermes, who I briefly mentioned before. They openly worship the beast. I mean, you got things like Bohemian Grove out there. When you get to the high levels of Freemasonry, this is what these people are. And I have the quotes and the bibliography, and everything's there for people to read. I agree with you. In the lower levels of Freemasonry, it's just a club. I mean, they don't realize what they're involved in.
No, I've met the high levels. I mean, very, very high. So, and even at that level, it's a club. I mean, I would say I've noticed just from some of your writings, you're a New World Order and person in conspiracy. I mean, are you a conspiracy theorist? Do you believe in the conspiracies?
Well, just to address that term, in the conspiracy theory, that's an invention that came out of the CIA MK Ultra program, and anybody that questioned, the so-called establishment was a conspiracy theorist. I mean, if you question the establishment, then you're wrong. I mean, and all the establishment does is lie. I mean, weapons of mass destruction. I did not have sex with that woman. Trump colluded with the Russians, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just lie after lie after lie. But if you question that, you're a conspiracy theorist. Okay, for example, the Federal Reserve. I mean, it's a blatant economic scam. And I could spend hours, and I have, talking about that. I discussed that in my books, just as an example. but to question it, you're a conspiracy theorist. But there it is. I mean, you go to the debt clock in Times Square, and it's at 36 trillion and counting. We can mathematically never pay it off without withdrawing every dollar from the U.S.
No,
economy.
no, no. I agree with you on the U.S.
So,
debt. When
so
I say conspiracy, I'm talking global, like the European Union, U.S., like everybody's in cahoots through like the Trilateral Commission, that sort of teaching. That I didn't know if you also go there in your analysis.
yeah. Oh, yeah. No, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations. I mean, ultimately, these groups all interconnect. They were all invented by the same names. I mean, the same names in America, the same names behind the Federal Reserve. And I mention that because that's the genesis of the New World Order. I mean, the world.
Okay, now that's where I cut ties with you because the book of Daniel specifically talks about an empire age. And uh, the conspiracy for me is like saying that God is not enough, geopolitics is not enough, we need somehow a conspiracy. But it's not even possible for that to take place because you can't, it's very difficult, even when people are in the same political party, for them to agree, let alone for all these world leaders to be part of like the Trilateral Commission. And by the way, not all of these leaders, there's different groups per entity. There's different prestigious think tanks that they may, certain ones may be involved in. There's so much diversity, there's so many differing opinions that it's not possible. Thus goes back to the end of the miracle of the unfolding of prophecy, because somehow it all fits. And right now there is no new world order. Globalization has been eroded, and now we literally are in an empire age, and you have fierce competition with the empires. So how are you going to have this global governance that is spoken of by a lot of prophecy people when geopolitically we're in a totally different age? But that's exactly what the prophet Daniel spoke of. In Daniel, let's see, I have my verses. In Daniel 8, hold on, I'm going to get my verse over here. Um, he talked about, let's see, in the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, and it insomuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. It's talking about a kingdom. It's talking about an empire, a final empire. And we're already seeing the groundwork for that, for the Antichrist to rise from. So I just want to say that that's where I differ from you, is I look at it geopolitically, I look at the empire, and I look at, does the empire have everything? And also, the leading empire is going to have, right now you're seeing in geopolitics, reciprocity. It's been talked of by Emmanuel Macron, and it's also now just been floated by our new Secretary of State, who basically said reciprocity. And so what you're going to see in the future is the empires becoming so strong that they're going to make other nations have to follow or abide by their laws. Europe is already doing that with the Digital Services Act. It's got an AI Act. The US is now going to be doing it. So I think it's going to be more of this final empire that's going to be so strong and so powerful, and it's going to be producing the products such as the mark of the beast, the technologies, and the other nations will fall in line. So that's how it fits geopolitically. But as far as these leaders coming together, in my travels within Europe and within the political parties, I can tell you that they all, certain leaders within their own parties, they don't even like, or certain key figures they may not like. So I can't see how you can have this world government where everybody agrees. It's just not humanly possible. It's not possible. You can't even get married couples to agree that always get along. How are you going to get world leaders from all different entities to agree on this final empire? Now, is Satan at work? I believe it. And I believe also that God is at work, and things are going to happen through the natural order of circumstances. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, getting the world to agree. I mean, look, figuring out biblical prophecy. I mean, everybody, even people that are well more versed than me, don't agree. Is Israel the center of biblical prophecy and this sort of thing? I happen to look at the Bible as more symbolic. But I believe one scenario is that you will have a calamitous economic collapse of the West, in Japan, Germany, the United States, which is impending with the derivatives and the aforementioned debt of the
Well,
United
but okay,
States.
now you've mentioned Germany. Okay, Germany is part of the European Union. They're now launching what's called their competitive compass. They're going to be deepening the single market. There's even though Germany is having a crisis right now, you have areas within the European Union that are very strong. And as they enact these next decisions, they're going to become pretty strong. But I do agree with you that the US dollar is potentially in a lot of trouble because of our deficit. So I don't know that it's going to happen necessarily because Germany, and also Europe is hedging its economy. It's got about 76 trade pacts right now. The US has 23. Currently, with Trump's proposals, what Europe is now doing is now they're looking to cement an agreement with India, which would be huge because they've got one on the table, but they're looking to now really get to work on that as well as improve their ties with China. So what Europe is doing, as we see in Revelation 18, that this final empire is about trade and is about products. What Europe is doing is essentially hedging because they're realizing that the US is not going to be that partner, and they're hedging by forming alliances with other empires. So I guess what I'm saying to you is I don't agree that that economic collapse is potentially global because you also have the BRIC nations in Russia. That's a whole nother entity operating financially, pulling away from the Western system. So I don't agree that you're going to have a total collapse, but at the same time, when the dollar does finally tank, it will affect world markets, of course.
Well, you have the derivatives time bomb that's out there, and who knows how many countries are tied in with that. But well, Satan is in charge. First John chapter 5. The whole world lies under the control of the wicked one. Satan's involved. Of course, the whole thing's a lie, and it's a can of worms trying to figure this out. I don't disagree, but
Well, actually, with Satan involved, what he's going to do is you're going to see this evolution of this final empire, this empire becoming stronger. So he's going to work it because the scripture does tell us that this final empire provides the seat of the Antichrist, the political seat that he will rise from. So I agree with you partially, and I agree with you totally on the dollar, and that something is definitely coming. But I don't know at the time when it happens, how much will the whole entire world be affected. If it's down the road, 5 years from now, by that time, Europe will have its capital markets union, its banking union, will have other agreements solidified, and who knows what other changes are going to take place. And so I don't know what the impact is exactly going to be. If it happens within the next 6 months, well, then definitely it's going to have a greater impact on the globe. So, but you definitely are, incredible with your research on this particular individual and how he's popped up through history. And there is this influence, and the Freemasons' influence in politics and in Europe, because a lot of them hold seats. I mean, goodness, the European Parliament is in a circle, and a circle is your chief symbol of the devil.
I think not to get too mired down in a geopolitical situation. I mean, we have another situation unfolding in parallel. I mean, that's disclosure. I mean, you have all these UFO sightings going on now. Luke chapter 21, Jesus said, men's heart will fail them for what is coming upon the earth. So there may be something, quote, extraterrestrial that makes an appearance, when God allows it, that will cause the world to freak out and that will overwhelm whatever economic, geopolitical infrastructure is in place at the time.
Have a point, and look at even the weather patterns. We're seeing a lot of strange things in weather. I believe the rapture is going to occur during one of those, possibly during the Ezekiel 38. I've actually stated it will occur. We see this catastrophic weather event in the Ezekiel 38 war, which I have written on, will launch the treaty, this coming treaty by the Antichrist, this false Messiah that's coming.
Well, yeah, I mean, so you're gonna have a situation. I mean, God judged Israel. Go to the Book of Judges, and and all throughout Isaiah and Jeremiah. Um, you know, things were, even Noah. I mean, at the time, people were marrying and giving in marriage and drinking and partying. So things can be humming along, and all of a sudden, God puts his foot down, and there's judgment. Now, I'm not going to say I know everything about biblical prophecy, but I believe there's going to be extra dimensional aspects to all this that are going to come into play. Being the aforementioned, extraterrestrial phenomenon. You start to see ancient aliens on the History Channel, for instance, which I believe are the Nephilim from Genesis chapter 6, and that's a
Oh,
whole.
yes, the Nephilim. Well, the Nephilim is possibly this, the Nephilim actually is the entity. I mean, that's giving way, will give way to the entity of the Antichrist, is the Nephilim.
I think Ronald Reagan said it, humans can never agree on anything, humans as a whole. But if there were to be some extraterrestrial event that, humanity would be forced to come together into some kind of new world order, that was Ronald Reagan as president. So, along that train of thought, uh, things are accelerating to that end. I mean, you mentioned, the weather control. It's not global warming or that whole scam. And I have a link on my website debunking the science of that. But you do have weather control, and that's not conspiracy theory, okay? That the United States military is controlling the weather in Vietnam going back to 1964. I mean, that's basic military history. And 60 years on, you have to believe that they've developed, mechanisms to control the weather, uh, you know, much, much easier these days. So you have that whole situation on. So, you have evil running the world, which I believe is going to transcend the geopolitical situation. So things are going to happen very radically. I mean, look at this country, for example. Okay, the United States was founded as a Christian nation. Okay, and I'm not one of these people. Oh, the founders were part of the conspiracy, and George Washington was a Freemason. I think that's all bunk. Okay, they were devout Christians. They developed and perpetuated the greatest country in the history of the world, the United States Constitution, which, if we followed it according to the prescription of the founders, there would be no New World Order. It's anti-communism. It's anti-New World Order. So to say that they were part of the conspiracy, I think is bunk. But be it as it may, we're a Christian nation. We were founded on, and look at us. I mean, we're at the point where we have abortion. Okay, and it's gone wild. Okay, and we're at an instance, for example, where we have to sign into law to disallow babies that are born alive after an abortion not to be killed. Okay, and according to some sources that I've read, that's happened up to 100,000 times in this country. Okay, so you take a look at that. So there's God's judgment has to befall this nation. Okay, you go to Luke chapter 12, 47 and 48. People will be punished in according to what they know. And this nation being founded as by devout Christians, as a devout Christian nation, to have fallen so far to be at a point where we have to make a law disallowing live babies not to be killed after an attempted abortion, as an example, shows how far we have fallen. So you have God's impending judgment on this nation, okay? And I believe we are the mystery Babylon of Revelation 17 and 18.
No, no, no.
I have a link on that.
We're not mystery Babylon. We can't be mystery Babylon. There's just no possibility that we're mystery Babylon, because if you look at Babylon and in both Revelation 18 and you look at Babylon in Jeremiah, the passage on Babylon 51, and also the king of Tyre. So we see the Antichrist affiliated with a empire that's formed around trade. Ancient Babylon became Babylon in part because it was the economic hub of the world. All the caravans, all the people went with all their products and they traveled to Babylon. The European Union right now is a trade hub. When you get off the plane in Rome, the first thing that happens is your eyes are opened to Revelation 18. It talks about the fine goods, the fine clothing, the fine products. Europe is known for its quality products. You get off the plane in Rome and you've got Gucci and Prada and all the designers that Italy is known for producing their fine clothing. And so I definitely saw Revelation unfolded in Europe. Everywhere you go in Europe, I don't care what country you're in, if you're at Versailles, if you're in Brussels, you're going to see the ancient gods, one of the ancient gods that started in Babylon, went through to the the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, and you still see each of those in front of buildings and especially at the Vatican. So how is the United States Mystery Babylon when the evidence points to Europe which was the Roman Empire, and now you have the revived Roman Empire in the European Union? So how is the United States Mystery Babylon?
Because it's the most evil. We have become the most evil nation in the history of the world in a short 250 years of our time frame. And going back again to Luke 12:47, 12:48, God will punish. He specifically singles out a nation for punishment, and he unleashes his wrath. And I've broken down Revelation 17 and 18 line by line, and I believe the circumstantial evidence is there. That these United States, it has to be United States. Look, I've heard other candidates. I've heard Europe. I've heard the Roman Catholic Church.
Europe kind of runs circles around the United States. I mean, and just in the next treaty, they had a proposal. They're working on a treaty revisions. And just in the next treaty, what they were going to put in the treaty was just shocking compared to U.S. law. And I'm talking on the social issues. And when you're in Europe, you can see that the conservatives, I met a conservative in Luxembourg. He now is an MEP. And he joked that he, his wife, and his son you're meeting the only conservatives in Luxembourg. Now, Luxembourg is a little tiny nation, but the conservatives are really a minority, not like in the United States, and they're very much a minority, so much so they're really labeled as right-wing extremists, most of them. And so I saw much more, Europe is much different than the United States. So when you're saying the United States, takes the cake in evil, I can't say that I agree. I still pin Babylon on Europe, and Europe seems to be much more liberal in the social issues than the United States.
Well, look, again, we started as devout Christians, and we fallen to the point where we have rapid abortion. Nobody has disseminated or distributed the LGBTQ gay marriage hocus pocus to the world as the United States. International Planned Parenthood.
But so doesn't Europe. I mean, that's really considered much more.
Europe did not evolve. I mean, aside from the Roman Catholic Church, which isn't a Christian at all, Europe did not have the gifts. They were not privy to the gifts, to the greatest government structure in the history of the world based on Christian principles. I
will agree with you on one thing with the United States that you don't see in Europe, even though Europe is known for like its decadence. I definitely, there's much more crime, much more horrific, shocking serial murders, violence that parents are committing against their own children that you can't even imagine. So you do see there's definitely more of that. I would say that the European cities have a safer feel than the United States, much safer. So I agree with you in the sense of the United States, just within our nation, it can be pretty dangerous.
I look at all the wars that we started, initiated, the governments that we've overthrown overseas, the military-industrial complex. Okay, as I cover in my book, The Un-American Genocidal Complex, we gave AIDS to the world. It was invented in the lab, didn't come from an African green monkey. We have the whole COVID scenario and those vaccines. We have people like Bill Gates running around looking to disseminate vaccines. We have the environmental movement, okay, which really has its roots here, which is really a population control movement, and through things like abortion, sterilization of the population, all this
Well, I'll tell you another
bubbles up
policy.
from
I
the
mean, I
United
think a policy
States.
that God has really said he judges is our sanction policy. The United States, we have sanctioned more countries, and when you sanction nations, you completely impoverish them, you impoverish the people. And there's all kinds of judgments that God speaks to, even world leaders, about not oppressing the poor. And that is one policy that we have. And if I believe our dollar is going to tank, it's going to be in part because of that policy, because nations are resisting. Now, I understand that we have beefs with certain nations, but to impoverish and starve the people of the nations, that's what we do. And so, and we've done it on an unprecedented scale. And I think that that's a real evil on the part of our government. I think there's other ways that they could have dealt with leaders instead of starving out their people and starving out the
You're
nations.
exactly right, and I cover that in my book, The Un-American Genocidal Complex. Is that the environmental movement? We've been famishing nations all over the earth. In addition to the aforementioned vaccines and the color revolutions and the wars. I mean, this nation has become a cesspool of pure evil, and it's unmatched, I believe, in human history. You go back to World War One, the banks and World War II even, and you go back and you look at Adolf Hitler was the creation of Wall Street. Okay, that's documented also in the Un-American Genocidal Complex. So we've created monsters. Communism, okay, Anthony Sutton has a book called Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. Basically, we invented communism. We embroidered.
Okay, so you have some good points. Now, tie it to the Antichrist. Let's tie it to the Antichrist. So how does all of this tie to the coming of the Antichrist? As the U.S. falls, it's going to give the Antichrist even more carte blanche, let's say, for his world domination.
Well, you're going to have calamitous events, and one of them is the sudden destruction of the United States, okay, which could induce the Gog and Magog war. I'm still looking into that. I'm still doing a lot of research, and even amongst
So yeah,
biblical
so that's
scholars,
how do you tie this in with the coming? And also, just give me a few thoughts. What's your thoughts on the Antichrist? The Antichrist, what is he going to be like?
Well, he's going to be a human. Okay, he's going to be a man. Um, if you go back to Isaiah chapter 14, and the other devils that are already in hell are mocking Lucifer or Satan and say, "Is this the man that has basically conquered the world and was so powerful in the world? And, he's just going to die like a man." So you have that. So I believe it's going to be a human of unparalleled charisma, and who that human's going to be, who knows?
But also an entity at the same time.
Um,
Half devil, half man. That's
yeah,
kind of what
look,
you were
I don't know.
alluding to with this character in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's not going to have horns, 666 stamped on his forehead like in the Damien Omen movies. It's not going to be like that. So it's not going to be a guy with a pitchfork, but he's going to be a guy of unprecedented.
He's not going to be coming out with a pitchfork.
So,
Sorry,
that's all right. No,
I'm losing it here.
He's going to be a man of great charisma. He'll be possessed.
Actually, according to the book of Daniel 2, he's a deceiver. It says that after the league is made with him, he works deceitfully. Daniel chapter 8 gives wonderful verses on his deception, so that even when he gets his political seat, he's still a deceiver. The world is not going to have any idea that this individual is evil. It's not until that abomination of desolation, that 3.5 year mark, that once he's raised his empire to its pinnacle of power, like this is now by far the strongest empire to have ever existed. And he's going to have AI and technology and all kinds of wonderful evil things at his disposal.
Right.
Then he comes out and says that he is God. He steps into the temple. And from that point, Jesus said, will be great tribulation, such as the world has never known. And he changes times and laws. And I mean, we can't even imagine the level of evil at that time. So,
Again, he's going to come in as a man of peace, implying that there's going to be a major world event, which I happen to think is the destruction of Mystery Babylon. And I, will agree to disagree on the identification of that
well,
entity.
I believe there is the destruction in Revelation 18, but I believe that's talking about on the way to Armageddon. We see that the Antichrist pitches his tent. He actually extends his boundaries into Jerusalem. He's in Jerusalem at the time of the end. That's why the battles, the armies all come, because they all come to Jerusalem, because probably to go after when everybody realizes what's happened with this guy, and they go to Jerusalem, and thus, the Battle of Armageddon. But it states that he will be there, and then Babylon is the destruction of Babylon comes. And so I believe it happens on the way to Armageddon, or before the Battle of Armageddon, sometime before. His kingdom is now attacked, or this earthquake that God allows, this earthquake that God ushers in.
Yeah, I mean, the exact unfolding of events, it's hard, and I read about this stuff every day, and it's hard to pin it down exactly. But I believe in the general construct is that the United States will come to a calamitous and sudden end, and then that will open up the world. I mean, we're the protector of Israel. Israel is God's chosen people. I mean, I don't want to get into that right now. I'm not one of these Israel first, Zionist Christians, but be that as it may, that will open up the world to attack Israel. Then you get into Zechariah's prophecy, Zechariah 12, and it will look like on me who they have pierced, and then they'll be sorry. So I think Israel is going to kind of freak out when they see the armies of the world, and who knows what other entities are available to come in and retake Jerusalem. But again, I think that's dependent on a destruction of the United States, and I'm not necessarily a biblical literalist. Okay, as far as the numbers and the times, and we spend a lot of time on that. We didn't touch
I've
on
spent a lot of time on that. The
but
abomination of desolation, that's when the siege comes from the Antichrist himself. That's when he turns against Israel. But that's a whole nother topic. Now we go to the next section of our show, which we call the Divine Dozen. And I think you've provided great insights. And I liked your study of this character who has appeared through history, and the relation to events around this character. But our audience likes to know about you. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions that are on the personal side, so our audience can get to know who is Rob. So the first question is, what book is on your bedside table?
well, on my little bedside table, I mean, I like to just go to bed and not have books, but the Bible. And I have several books. Defense of the Faith by Dave Hunt, The Great Inception, Derek Gilbert. I like I'm always trying to study up, and you can never get enough of Christianity. So those are the books that I read on a regular basis. A lot of times when I'm sitting in front of the TV, I just have it on as background noise and I'm reading. So I would say right now, plus, my wife gives me a hard time because I keep collecting all these books and throughout the house and all this sort of thing. But right now, those are the ones that I read. Plus, a lot of books on the secular side of the conspiracy, that I have in my collection that I've read, that I've documented in my books. So those right now, I mean, it's spent eons going through all the titles that I have.
Okay. What was the last TV or streaming show that you watched?
I like watching football. I mean, it's the only sport that I follow. So the NFL playoffs, the college national championship, it's just to kind of take my mind off some of this stuff. I mean, that's
Okay, so you last watched football and you like to watch football.
yes, and that's it. I mean, that's my sport. A few months,
Hmm.
and the other months, and then as far as TV, I watch Fox News just to make sure the world hasn't blown up during the day. I mean, I work during the day, but
Great.
again, a lot of times it's on there as background noise, and and I'm reading my books and this sort of thing. So,
Okay. What three songs would be on your all-time playlist?
hmm. uh, well, there was a great song back in the '80s by the Hooters called "All You Zombies," which really talked about God's impending judgment on unwashed masses, so to speak. And I thought that was a great song and really prophetic.
Okay.
Um, as far as I like a lot of I listen to Christian music now. I have in the past listened to secular music. I hate to admit it, but I like Led Zeppelin. I mean, they're a bunch of occultists themselves.
Hmm.
I mean, into that, Aleister Crowley and all that whole crowd. But um, I think "Stairway to Heaven's" a good song, and if you really listen to the words and understand them, it's a very occult-based song. It's very interesting once you understand and have the knowledge that I have about the ISIS and the Whore of Babylon and this sort of thing. A woman that's never been born is what they're alluding to. That's a good song, and I don't know. The Eagles, Hotel California. Again, another very deep song. Off the top of my head, those.
Okay. And where do you get your news from?
Well, I did mention, Fox just to kind of keep up on major events, but I like InfoWars. I'm a big Steve Quayle fan. Steve agrees with, he's very much advanced in his knowledge of the Nephilim and Genesis 6 and the upcoming UFO disclosure. And he's a great source of information. Well, he agrees with me that the United States is Mystery Babylon. So I'd say, and then Mike Adams over at Natural News
Hmm.
is another one. Although I don't like he's trying to go off and do these sermons, which I don't necessarily agree with, but he does have some great information and some great guests on his website.
Okay. And actually, you kind of just answered the next one. Is there an author, podcast, website, or social media personality you recommend?
Again, I would say Steve Quayle. He doesn't know me from a hole in the wall. I have no affiliation with him, so I'm giving his name out freely. But as a fellow traveler, a fellow Christian, I think he's spot on with. I mean, he puts out daily news stories and pulls from multiple sources. So I think he's number one in my book as far as keeping up with current events in parallel or in conjunction with what's unfolding in biblical prophecy.
Okay. And what is your favorite fast food?
Pizza. I don't know if that's considered I don't know if that's considered fast food, but here in the New York City metroplex, every town's got half a dozen pizza joints. So unfortunately, it's not salad, but
That's right. You're in New Jersey.
yeah. But I like Chick-fil-A. I think Chick-fil-A is great.
Okay.
Um, it's probably my favorite and kind of healthy. So
Mm. Okay. Uh, who are you afraid of?
who am I afraid of? Uh, well, you try to be like King David. I mean, he wasn't even intimidated by the incarnated Nephilim Goliath, but I don't like to think anybody. But I'd say have a little healthy fear of of the devil himself. I mean, Ephesians chapter 6. Not total fear. I mean, 1 John 4. He that is within you is stronger than he that is in the world. But it's a little it's a little concerning as to what's going to unfold and who that personality would be. So I would say, I'd be lying to say that person
Hmm.
that's going to be.
And who makes you laugh?
Who makes me laugh? Well, I think comedy has really fallen off the cliff. I mean, going back to the '80s, can I cite dead people? I mean, that's what Rodney
Yeah,
Dangerfield.
yeah. Who makes you laugh? And maybe you
Rodney,
listen to on YouTube, you can listen to anybody. I mean, you can go back. It's amazing all the different shows that are on YouTube. So yeah, citing someone who's dead is fine. They're probably on YouTube.
yeah. I mean, I'd say movies like Caddyshack or Stripes. Bill Murray, Rodney Dangerfield, Chevy Chase in Vacation. Um, they just don't make comedy like that anymore. I mean, you got these goofballs on late night TV, which are really just political hacks in disguise. I mean, they make you want to puke versus laugh. But Bill Murray's another one. I have to say, going back to 40, 50 years ago, I mean, those types of comedians, Steve.
Okay.
So,
Who is the celebrity, politician, or expert you'd be most nervous about meeting?
most nervous about meeting celebrities, or
Celebrity, politician.
as far as nervous, look, I guess I have to say Donald Trump. I mean, just because the fact that he's the president of the United States, just by his position. I mean, it seems like in certain aspects a down to earth guy. But if I was to go to the White House tonight and meet with Donald Trump, I'd try to be a little bit, I think, be a little bit nervous, just
Okay.
something like that.
Okay. And he was also a celebrity before he was a
Sure,
president, politician.
sure.
Okay. What's your order at Starbucks?
I don't go to Starbucks. I've never liked coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker. I like iced tea.
Okay, so where do you go to D&D's for the iced tea? Where do you go?
I try not to drink it too much. I try to keep my caffeine down to a minimum, but I'll order it with meals if I go out. But generally, in this area, New York City metro area, we have independent bagel joints that are, some of them are top notch. You go in there and you get at the right time and you get the bagels and they're still warm. I mean, that's the greatest. So,
You go, so you have no coffee. Okay, so you don't do coffee. That's fine. I don't do coffee either. I'm a teetotaler. Total tea, like major, like I'm a tea connoisseur.
sure.
So so then where do you go? Because I want to know. I want to know because I go into the city and I'm in the same area as you. I want to know. Where do you go and what do they have to drink? That's good. Give
Well,
me, give a recommendation here. So if it's not your order at Starbucks, where would you go?
I mean, the bagel joints in the city are a dime a dozen, and they have all these
No, I
great
mean for
dishes.
your tea, for your iced tea. Where
Well,
who has like great iced tea?
I don't. I mean, I just drink. I'll drink zero water, or I'll get a Snapple. I mean, nothing real.
Okay, so in other words, you just don't do any of those places, period.
Not the specific fancy places. No, not really.
And there's no type of drink. Okay. Um, so you're not the person who gets up and has a caffeine fix in the morning, whether it's coffee or tea.
No, I usually make a fruit smoothie with orange juice and strawberries and blueberries, some protein
Okay. And the city,
supplements.
I know like the area you're in has great smoothie, those places that make those.
Sure, sure.
I'm
There's
trying to get a
oh,
place out of you, Rob. I'm trying to get a
oh,
place.
my favorite restaurant. I mean, if you want to go to a restaurant in the city, I think it's Carmine's. They make a chicken parmesan that's out of this world. I mean, a huge portion. There's one in, I think it's the Upper West Side, and there's one down in Atlantic City. As far as restaurants, and there's
Yes.
Katz's Delicatessen. I've never personally been there, but everybody that I know that has been there, it just raves about the place. And then I think that's in the Lower East Side, somewhere in Manhattan.
Okay.
That's a little
Now, how many Kardashians can you name?
Kim. Um, and then Robert Kardashian, he was the attorney, right? That got it all started.
Hmm.
So he's attorney, right? I would say those two. I mean, other than that, they kind of nauseate me. And the whole
Okay.
concept of how they got famous is not going back that down that trail.
And what's your version? This is the final question. What is your
Okay.
version of hell, the worst way to spend a day or an evening?
Worst way to spend a day or an evening. I mean, I just try to enjoy every day. I mean, I go to work. I spend time with family on the weekends. I mean, the worst day. I don't know. I guess I have to say sitting in traffic, trying to get to New York City and, or coming out of the city. Sometimes
Okay,
it seems
good
like that takes
answer.
some.
That's a nightmare. I hear that. Well, anyway, that basically concludes our show. Rob, where can people find you? Where can they find your books? If you want to give one last pitch.
Sure. Again, it's boxofsunglasses.com. That's all one word.
Box of sunglasses, the name. Why the name Box of Sunglasses?
Well, that's
I'm
out of
not
my
going to forget boxofsunglasses.com, but why Box of Sunglasses?
well, that's out of my favorite movie, John Carpenter's They Live. And people always ask me about this, and let me just show you this. The title here,
Mm-hmm.
They Live, and I embedded it in the theory of evolution. Uh, Evolution, which we didn't talk about as far as the evil of the United States, but we'll backtrack. But anyway, boxofsunglasses.com is in honor of Roddy Piper when he finds the box of sunglasses in the movie They Live, and all of a sudden he sees the world as it is. Um, and I believe John
Okay.
Carpenter was a closet Christian, by the way. It's a very
So therein was your inspiration of seeing the world as it is, and thus the
right.
name. Okay, so we're not going to forget that name. That's easy. Boxofsunglasses.com. And are your books on Amazon? Are they all over the internet, or is it just through your website?
Well, there's links to the books on the top of the page when you go there and you go to the homepage. There's links, and the books are available on Amazon. But you can link directly to them through the website. And then my contact information and my Twitter handle at Rob Roselli and my email info@boxofsunglasses.com. That's also on the top of the homepage on my website. And, I really tried to streamline the website as hard as it is to do. It's as hard as trying to lasso in Robert Christian.
Yes,
Um,
the Robert Christian book is on there. That's fascinating. Just
the Robert
fascinating.
Christian ebook, yeah, and again, and I apologize for kind of jumping around, but and I'll conclude with this: there's an ebook, but literally, it's probably almost 300 pages of text, and it's fully footnoted. Every chapter, every electronic chapter, they're all individual PDFs. It's fully footnoted
Hmm.
bibliography, and I'm citing credible sources there. But people really need to read that whole link and look, hopefully you enjoyed this. And if you have me back on, we can dig a little deeper and go down that rabbit hole. It's quite a
Well,
fascinating journey.
yes, well, anything of how he will relate to the Antichrist. If you get more insights, definitely contact me and we can talk about it. I'm very intrigued by this book of yours and by this character who has showed up throughout history. And it sounds like you're the expert on him now.
Yeah, I can say this: nobody has conglomerated or coagulated the information on Robert Christian or the Count of Saint Germain or Count Dracula. It's associated with him, believe it or not,
Really?
as I have. And again, I did my best to categorize the character of Robert Christian. Again, he spans all the way from ancient Egypt, if you read the legends, all the way to the Georgia Guidestones in this country, Elberton, Georgia, in 1980.
So, on a final comment, how is he now appearing in these end times?
Well, he's a mysterious character. Who knows? I mean, who knows what who he will possess or who will do automatic writing through him. As I mentioned, the woman out in California was doing automatic writing from Saint Germain. Uh, who knows? I mean, you go back to
Wow.
First Peter 5:8. Satan prowls around like a lion looking for who he can devour. And I believe Robert Christian certainly fits the bill.
What an insight. Well, Rob, thank you so much. It was a definitely interesting interview. And and again, contact me in the future when as you further do research and if you or write something else that you feel would fit. Definitely would enjoy having you back.
Hi, Anna. Thanks a lot for having me. God bless. And, again, just remember, big as a mess this is, God and his son, Jesus Christ, are in control of the whole mess. So people need to keep that in mind.
Yes. Well, again, thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
That was really fascinating about Robert Christian. At first, when Rob was mentioning Robert Christian, it's going off in my head that, well, how could this be a major detail? Robert Christian, just the name sounds so mundane and boring. And Robert Christian, like he's shown up at intersections in history. But then that was so fascinating how Rob was correlating him with different individuals in history and how he showed up at different intersections. How intriguing. It makes me want to go out and get Rob's ebook so I can learn more and get even more clues from this entity because he has appeared at different intersections. I hope you found that really informative. And you want to be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comments, not only your thoughts. I want to hear what you think about the Antichrist. Where do you think he's going to come from? And if you think that you have a clue, definitely let us know. And also, hit that subscribe button. Don't be shy, hit it. Anyway, I'm Erika Grey. Thanks for watching, and see you next time on The Hunt for the Antichrist.